Most companies think scaling looks like momentum, more dashboards, more meetings, more outreach, more content, more reporting, more people jumping in to fix whatever broke this week. From the outside, that can look like growth. It can look disciplined. It can even look ambitious. But in a surprising number of businesses, all that motion is hiding the real problem. The company is not failing because it needs more output. It is failing because its structure does not reflect reality well enough to scale. And that is the big shift behind organizational physics. It says a business should not be treated like a pile of disconnected tasks. It should be treated like a system with forces, constraints, relationships, and consequences. In other words, the question is not, how do we make more? The question is, does the system understand what happens next? And once you see scaling through that lens, a lot of common business advice starts to look backwards. Think about what happens inside most organizations as they grow. Data multiplies, messages multiply, tools multiply, everyone gets busier, the CRM fills up, Slack never stops. Reports get longer, meetings get more frequent, pipeline reviews become rituals. Teams start measuring everything they can see because measuring feels like control. But information is not the same as understanding. In fact, a company can be drowning in information while becoming less intelligent. That is because noise is easy to collect and hard to interpret. A dashboard can tell you conversion dropped. It usually cannot tell you why trust broke at a handoff, where time disappeared in the process, or which incentive pushed the wrong behavior. So the problem is not that businesses lack data. The problem is that they often lack structure. They are staring at outputs without a stable way to represent the underlying state. In AI, one of the most powerful ideas is that raw input matters less than the internal representation you build from it. If the model can form a reliable picture of reality, it can make better predictions. Organizational physics applies that logic to business. Instead of obsessing over surface activity, it asks a deeper question. What hidden structure does this data reveal? What is the actual state of the business beneath the visible metrics? Because if your sales funnel is underperforming, the answer is rarely make the dashboard prettier. The real issue might be friction in the handoff between marketing and sales. It might be a pricing model that creates hesitation. It might be broken trust after the first call. The visible metric is just the symptom. The structure underneath is the cause. And this is where most leadership teams get trapped. They are reacting to symptoms. They are reacting to symptoms because they do not have a true model of consequence. They can solve the problem in front of them today, but they cannot reliably simulate what happens tomorrow. What happens to margin if discounting rises by 8%? What happens to revenue if SDR output increases, but lead quality drops and the close rate falls? Without a causal model, leadership turns into a mix of instinct, habit, politics, and storytelling after the fact. Someone makes a decision. Results show up later. Then everyone builds an explanation that makes the decision sound smarter than it was. That is not strategy. That is guesswork with expensive consequences. A structurally intelligent company operates differently. It builds a documented map of how the system behaves. It knows which actions create downstream effects. It knows which constraints cannot be violated. That kind of business is not waiting for failure to become obvious. It is building predictive horizons. It is asking, if we push here, what bends over there? That is a radically different operating logic. The organization is no longer just reacting. It is learning to reason from structure. And that is what real scale requires. One of the clearest signs that a company does not have this is how much heroism it requires to stay functional. There is a business that seems to run well, but only because a few unusually capable people are constantly rescuing it behind the scenes. They reconcile inconsistent data by hand. They correct preventable mistakes. They patch workflows everyone knows are broken. They make judgment calls the system should have already encoded. They protect quality. They save margins. They prevent customer disasters. And because they are talented, the company starts calling this excellence. It praises commitment. It celebrates hustle. It turns emergency repair into culture, but heroics are evidence of disorder. The goal of organizational physics is not to eliminate strong people. It is to stop wasting strong people on recurring structural weakness. A healthy operating system should know when a pricing action breaks margin. It should detect when a workflow creates downstream service failure. It should make the right path easier, not depend on exceptional employees to notice problems after the damage starts. In other words, the company should not survive because certain people are always compensating. It should survive because less compensation is needed in the first place. There is another hidden cost most businesses barely notice. They are losing intelligence every single day. It disappears into Slack threads no one will find again. It sits inside undocumented decisions. It gets trapped in isolated spreadsheets. It lives in tribal knowledge, private habits, and the minds of employees who leave. In that organization, experience does not compound, it evaporates. The company keeps paying tuition for the same lessons because it never turns learning into durable infrastructure. Organizational physics treats memory differently. It treats persistent memory as a strategic asset. That means creating systems where operational experience is structured, retrievable, and usable in future decisions. Not just stored, but organized to learn which patterns matter. This is where institutional intelligence becomes a real advantage. The business is no longer dependent on a handful of people remembering everything. It begins to build an intelligence vault. That vault becomes part of the operating system. Over time, the company is not just collecting information, it is building owned intelligence that improves judgment and reduces repetition. That matters even more now because most of the conversation around AI is still stuck at the surface. Can it write emails, marketing copy, summarize meetings, answer support tickets? Sure. Those things matter. They can save time, but they are still surface-level capabilities. The deeper opportunity is using AI to model reality more accurately inside the organization. The biggest winners in the next era will not just be the companies generating the most content. They will be the ones building systems that understand causality and reason within constraints. They will be the ones that preserve institutional memory and improve decisions over time. That is a much bigger prize than automation alone. It is operational intelligence grounded in reality. And maybe the simplest way to test whether a company is moving in that direction is with 3 questions. Do we understand the underlying state or only visible outputs? Can we model how a change in one behavior will affect downstream results? Are we scaling through system design or through human heroics? Those questions reveal more than dashboards. Those questions force leaders to confront whether the company is actually learning or just staying busy. That is the core message here. The future does not belong to those who move faster. The future belongs to organizations that understand their own internal physics, the ones that can identify hidden structures, the ones that turn operational learning into a permanent asset. Because in the end, a business does not scale through effort alone. It scales when its structure becomes intelligent enough to align with reality. Once you see growth as a structural game, you stop rewarding activity. You start designing for clarity, consequence, and intelligence. That is when a company stops fighting complexity and starts using it to grow stronger. If this changed how you think, like, and subscribe. And if this changed how you think about scaling, subscribe to the channel and like the video.